After Relay Team 40 met with the governor and the teams were complete and the relay and the logbook was dedicated and everything was done, now the real work began. The exploration of Southern California and Central California was a lot of open space. A lot of the trails that they used for the Pacific Crest Trail were trails that already pre-existed in Oregon and Washington. There was a lot of just coagulating or putting together, joining. There was a lot of joining together of different trail systems that linked to Pacific Crest Trail. Washington had quite a few trails that just fit into it. They didn't have to do much. The California Conservation Corps was spent several years before the relay teams actually got going, clearing brush, laying trail, doing a lot of work. But a lot of what these guys did in the first Southern California area, and a lot of what my dad did, was just trail exploration. What made a good hiking trail potential? What mountain, what ridgeback, where could they go, where was it safe, where was water? Water was a big thing. So after the relay teams actually completed their trip, now my dad and Clarke really got to work. And now, after the first season, after the first year that the relay teams, Clinton C. Clarke had established the Pacific Crest Trail conference systems. And he then named my dad the General Secretary of the conference. Clarke was president, my dad was secretary. At this time, the bond was set. They were an item. It was Rogers and Clarke from then on. Clarke was the figurehead, Clarke was the empowerment, Clarke was the political will to get it done. Rogers was the backbone and the legs to do it. My dad spent a lot of time on radio shows, conferences. There were over 1,000 broadcasts in the LA area on radios during the 1935, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40 time frame, trying to keep the interest alive in the PCT. Hey, you had a great hike. Now what are you going to do? Okay, now we have to make it permanent. Now we have to get rights of way. Now we have to find better paths. Now we have to work out the water situation. Now we have to figure out food drops. Where was it safe? Where was it not safe? Where could have been better? Every year, the trail is a living thing. It's in nature. The trail needs constant care. Trees fall down. I've heard that 1,000 trees a year cross the trail and fall down. Rock slides. Rivers change their course, or creeks change their course. Mudslides, it's monumental the amount of work dealing with nature every year, keeping something like the PCT alive. No money. Rogers and Clarke established the concept of let's make this permanent and let's keep it alive and going. We've done the relays, let's make it now a household word. They just about completed their efforts in 1939. They were just about really set. Trail was complete. Relays had been hiked. The teams were up there. They had been talked about. Rogers was going up and down the 3 states. Clarke was going back and forth to Washington by communication. Everything was pushed to completion of the trail.
After the Pacific Crest Trail relays in 1938, the Pacific Crest Trail Conference ran into problems. One of these was World War II. With the government focused on the war and the inability to secure land, the trail ran into disrepair.
Pearl Harbor devastated the trail. The trail was a viable entity in the minds of people. It was viable to the government. It was viable to the state governments. Pearl Harbor took the trail away. Of course, what are you going to do? People dying, world at war. Trail was secondary. Trail was ignored. My dad re-enlisted. Clarke did what he could do. When my dad came back from being in the military for the second time, he met up with Clarke again. After the end of the war, they got together and tried to figure out how they could go back and reestablish the PCT. All that work that they had done before, from 1932, 1939, gone. It just devastated them. But they had a dream. They did it once, they could do it again. So Clarke kept the Pacific Crest Trail conference going. My dad was still General Secretary of the conference. Clarke was president, and they started up again, the two of them. But this time they knew what they were doing. They had contacts. Well, there were so many different changes to rights of way and property ownership. Freeways were built, roads were built. It totally changed the entire course of what they were trying to do now. Till the end of the war, people that were still living today, or people who were living at that time, bought and sold property. People died, estate sales came up. The private property that was not in public forest lands changed hands. Rights of way were, what trail? I don't know what you're talking about. This is my land, I paid for it. Get off my land. The trail became in total disarray again. When my dad met my mom in 1945, 46, he met her in 45. It was Mary Elizabeth Unrick. Wonderful, wonderful lady. She was a woman that most people would be proud of today as being not a woman's lib, but a woman who had backbone, but knew how to stand beside her man, not behind him, but beside him. And she was just a great woman, Mary Elizabeth Unrick. They were married in 45, 46, I forget the exact date. They lived in Stockton, California when they got married. My dad was working with the YMCA up there. He had gotten another job with the YMCA after the war. My brother, Paul Warren Rogers, was born in 1947. And I, Donna Lee Rogers, was born in 1949. My sister, Candace Louise Rogers, was born in 1953, I'm pretty certain. Because I remember sitting in front of a black and white TV set in the living room when they brought her home from the hospital. I was so small. King Kong was scaring the living daylights out of me, black and white on her old black and white set.
During the 1940s and 50s, non-government land was bought and sold. Since the complete trail was never made permanent by acts of Congress, it was difficult to maintain. Rogers and Clarke worked hard to change things, but change came slow.
Dear Mr. Rogers, I enclose a statement that will interest the YMCA. I sent a copy to the main office in New York, asking that they have the local and national offices send in a like protest. You can help by getting the local YMCA units in California to send in like protests. Some of the national organizations are submitting requests to all their members. A postal card statement to the local Forest Service office in San Francisco will help. Perhaps, too, some of the head YMCA officials will attend the meeting in San Bernardino on February 19th at 10 a.m. in the Municipal Auditorium. You're doing a good work. Keep it up. I am disappointed that the YMCA did not follow up the fine job of traversing the PCT. The response to my statement that I sent over to important organizations, newspapers, and persons over the U.S. has been most encouraging. A list of signatures can be attached to this statement. Sincerely yours, Clinton C. Clarke.
Dear Mr. Clarke, I am very much interested in the National Citizenship Training Program which you have proposed. In the event you have not seen the remarks of Howard Zanisser entitled The Need for Wilderness Areas, I am attaching a copy which I had reprinted in the Congressional Record. You may also be interested to know that I have introduced S2101, to require congressional approval of any transfer of land from the National Wildlife Refuge. As a result of the efforts of the Army to take over part of the Wichita Wildlife Refuge, I have felt that such a curb on the authority of the Secretary of the Interior to sign away these areas is essential. Sincerely, Hubert H. Humphrey.
Dear Mr. Clarke, thank you for giving me the opportunity to see your National Citizenship Training Program and the information on the trailways. I appreciate your thought of me. Sincerely, Lyndon B. Johnson.
In 1957, Clarke died, and he left the monumental task of making the trail permanent to Warren Lee Rogers.